Hey there folks, I am the Starman, and today I wanted to do a short video covering what I learned from my one interaction with the notorious Austin Witsit, also known as WitsitGetsIt. I debated him, with debating quotes there, at 3 in the morning in the Flat Earth Friday space on Twitter. I admit, I misspoke a couple of times. There were a few questions he asked that I honestly couldn't answer in the moment, mainly because I had just endured a 45-minute long lecture from the host, and I honestly just wanted to go to bed. But he threw me into the debate with Witsit, and that's where I'll start my coverage. But you can find the full video from Alan of space audits, which I will include in the description down below. Overall, my conversation with Austin started with heliocentrism when he asked me for exclusive evidence that the Earth revolves around the sun. I wasn't there to talk about heliocentrism. I was there to discuss the moon landings, so I honestly didn't have anything to give him off the top of my head. Of course, he took that as his first win, and I'll even own up and give it to him that I didn't have anything in the moment because I just wasn't prepared. Although, to start, I basically told him it was irrelevant anyway because the globe model existed before heliocentrism. He wasn't having it though, and I'm not going to include that in this because it was basically just 5 minutes of him saying that my lack of evidence meant heliocentrism was a religion. I will, however, begin it when I told him what I'm studying in college. So let's begin.
They show me
Oh,
a drill
sure.
in my
Yeah. I
class.
mean, my like I said, my background is mostly it's like engineering, right? So I mean, like I said, relativity type stuff is really not my thing, so I'm not gonna like debate it or anything like that. Most of, my background is mostly in Newtonian mechanics. So I mean,
Oh, whoa, that's a problem, bro. Newtonian mechanics is over 100 years old. So we're actually not going to go back to the 1600s, back when some dude said that there was no time variable in his equation for gravity and it must be instantaneous, but that it's impossible without some medium acting in between the two. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, local engineering on the Earth doesn't require Newtonian mechanics to be true, right?
This was the first moment that left me absolutely speechless. Let me play that one more time in case you missed it.
Local engineering on the Earth doesn't require Newtonian mechanics to be true, right?
Wrong, Austin. Newtonian mechanics is absolutely foundational to engineering. I won't dive too deep into it here because this will come up again later.
I mean, in fact, all plane or all engineering uh, in the real world, right? Like we use plane survey. We assume the Earth is flat up to 100 square miles.
We do what, Austin? We assume the Earth is flat up to 100 square miles? Interesting choice of words there. Let's continue.
So we're not going to assume the curvature of the Earth. So are you banking on gravity and Newtonian mechanics here? I mean, what about engineering requires Newtonian mechanics be true?
I mean, like I said, my background is Newtonian mechanics. I mean, like stuff that I've done, say like orbital mechanics. Also like kinematics. No, like what?
You don't
I'm
know what
lost here.
kinematics is? All right, dude. This is what's so wild is why like you guys be just wild and don't even understand the basics. But like kinematics is geometry, so it's like how a body moves in relation to each other. Like this planet, quote unquote, moves around the sun. That would be a kinematic description, right? Like how bodies move in relation to each other. In dynamics would be what causes them to do that, the force that causes them to move. Newtonian mechanics would be a dynamic claim, of course. It's claiming a force that isn't even in your model anymore. That's super old. It also doesn't even work for the perihelion shift of Mercury. It falls apart super quickly outside the solar system fairy tale. So, I mean, so what you're saying is what you specialize in is something that's not even useful and not used at all from your paradigm anymore, and it's been debunked on the quantum, local, and cosmological scale.
Damn. Statics and dynamics are both used in engineering, though. Like
Right,
like
right.
design. I mean, building structures. I'm not talking about, like I'm not talking about like accounting for curve or whatever. I'm
Mhm.
talking about just simple sorry, statics and dynamics.
Yeah, okay. So dynamics in terms of cosmology or astrophysics is different than the idea that there's a system that's variable or changing, but it doesn't matter. Like I asked you already specifically, what about engineering that we do in the real world requires Newtonian gravity to be true?
I didn't even catch this in the moment, but he said Newtonian gravity, not mechanics. Either he specifically said Newtonian gravity because Newtonian gravity has been replaced with relativity and he wanted a gotcha moment, or he actually just doesn't know the difference between Newtonian mechanics and Newton's theory of gravity.
Aerospace engineering.
Aerospace engineering, can you explain which part of it requires Newtonian gravity to be true?
I'll admit, I didn't like the answer I gave him here, but again, I just wanted to go to bed, not debate with Gish Gallop champion and flat earth rapper Austin Whitsitt. I had answered his question already with statics and dynamics. Statics and dynamics are foundational in engineering. They're some of the first courses you take as an engineer to prepare for future courses, and they're both based in Newtonian mechanics. He genuinely does not know this because he's not an engineer, and he never even bothered looking into what engineers actually learn and do in the real world.
Well, I mean, to be fair, most design does account for, gravity. But yeah, I mean, like I said, my studies were in orbital mechanics. So, I mean, I haven't gotten too far in it yet because, I mean, like I said, I haven't graduated yet or anything, but I mean,
Okay, so wouldn't you have to have like a viable theory of gravity to have any substantial claim here regarding orbital mechanics?
Yes, Austin, we would. And we do. Your denial of science does not make it incorrect. Let's continue.
Which I don't know if you even understand it. You're talking about Newtonian mechanics. I mean, your current belief is that objects free fall, perpetually changing direction. So it's perpetually changing direction and free fall. That can't actually be demonstrated in any lab or anything. It's just antithetical to physics. And then worse than that is like you don't even have a gravity that works. Newtonian mechanics has been debunked.
Austin made so many incorrect claims in a row that it was hard to keep up in my half-asleep state. He said an orbit can't be demonstrated in a lab, which makes it antithetical to physics. To that, Austin, I say we can't create hurricanes in a lab, meaning hurricanes are antithetical to meteorology. See how funny that sounds? Creating something in a lab is not a requirement for it to be real. Also, not having a unified field theory or an explanation for every gravitational interaction is not the same as having no working model for gravity. For all local applications, like engineering, Newtonian works fine. On the cosmological scale, relativity works fine. Knowing there are things we can't explain and looking for answers does not mean the theory itself doesn't work. If I can land a rover on Mars and put men on the moon with my model of gravity, I'm just fine with it. If we can detect gravitational waves predicted by Einstein nearly 100 years before they were ever detected, I am again fine with that model as well. I would also like to take this moment to point out that the flat earth model doesn't even have an explanation as to why things fall down, yet they say we don't have a working model because we can't explain dark matter or dark energy. Let's move on.
So like, do you have any evidence of any of this or?
Newtonian mechanics has been debunked, or are you talking about Newton's like theory of gravity?
Newtonian mechanics has been debunked on the quantum scale. And of course, Newtonian gravity has been debunked everywhere. Did you know that?
He
Sorry,
wouldn't know.
Newtonian mechanics were debunked on the, what did you say?
The quantum scale.
On the quantum scale?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I mean, do we live on the quantum scale?
Yeah, but actually everything that we live on is comprised of the quantum scale. You didn't know?
This was the first part of the debate where I can say that Austin just blatantly lied. We do not live on the quantum scale. The things we live on being comprised of the quantum scale does not mean that we as humans live on the quantum scale.
How would he know that? He's too busy circle jerking Peter and fucking P-dubs.
All right, so you got nothing, bro. I mean, this is what's so funny, right? Is like, I don't think you guys even understand the basics. So, do you realize that in Newtonian's equations, or in Newtonian equations, he didn't even apply a time variable, which means that gravity would have to be instant. It would require instantaneous action at a distance.
I mean, again, I don't know much about relativity, and I'm sure
We're
that's
talking
really
about
more
Newton,
where you
dude.
go into that, like why, you need the time factor, right?
We weren't talking about relativity, though.
I know, but I'm saying that's where it comes in, is in relativity.
No, let's stick on Newtonian mechanics. I asked you a point blank question. It's crazy. No ballers can answer questions. Did you realize that in Newton's equations, there is no time variable, which would require gravity to be instant, which would require instantaneous action at a distance?
This was an example of Austin asking a completely irrelevant question. He purposely brought up a problem solved by relativity, but insisted relativity wasn't relevant. My answer to him is that on a human scale, here on the ground, relativistic equations simplify to Newtonian. It can absolutely be assumed that gravity acts instantaneously in the applications that we were discussing.
Sure. You know what? No. Let's say I didn't know that.
That's crazy, yeah. So you should have put that together when there's no time variable. So here's the problem. How can you have instantaneous action at a distance without a medium that is in mutual contact with the two bodies?
Austin then chooses to be condescending and say I should have noticed this, even though, again, this is a relativity question, and I told him I wouldn't discuss relativity because I've never studied it. He then asks me a question where he perfectly demonstrates a logical fallacy, which, by the way, he claims to hate logical fallacies, specifically by asking a question with a false premise. His question of, how can you have instantaneous action at a distance without a medium in mutual contact with the bodies, has a false premise. The reaction is not instantaneous, according to relativity. However, it can be assumed to be instantaneous in Newtonian applications. Assuming it's instantaneous is not the same as it actually being instantaneous.
You're just out of your depth, bro. Let's be real.
Austin then pretty much ends the interaction by saying I was out of my depth since I couldn't answer his fallacious question. Then he decides to quote Newton for some reason, so let's move on to that.
I'll quote Newton real fast, then I'm going to give up the mic. I don't want to hog it. Like, Newton straight up said, the idea that innate brute matter could act on other brute matter through the vastness over long distances in a vacuum without some medium, some intermediary medium acting between the two with mutual contact, is to me so great an absurdity that no man with competent faculty of thinking and philosophical matters could ever fall into it. And whether this medium be material or immaterial, I've left up to the consideration of the readers. Do you understand what he's saying? He's saying no one that's even slightly competent would believe that you could have instantaneous action at a distance with gravity without some medium exchanging that interaction in mutual contact of the bodies. So in your own paradigm, Newtonian gravity is laughably irrelevant and not viable. You're going to need an ether for that, bro.
I honestly don't even know what the point was of him bringing up this quote, because as you'll see later on, he'll say that even within ether, the model doesn't work, making this quote entirely irrelevant.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say Newton was a proponent of ether theory, correct?
Well, he proposed an ether, but that's not the point. The point is that in the real world right now, your paradigm can't have an ether, because then you got to go back to Michelson Morley. Now the Earth's not moving. Now you're in trouble. So now that means there might be a God, and you guys get all weird and freak out about it. So you can't have an ether. That means you can't have Newtonian mechanics. So like when I ask you for evidence, right? Like you're like, oh, well, I focus on engineering and aerospace, orbital mechanics, and Newtonian mechanics. And it's like, okay, but what does that have to do with the real world?
This was the final moment where I was genuinely speechless, and this is basically where I decided to just tap out from the conversation. Let's hear that one more time.
Well, I focus on engineering and aerospace, orbital mechanics, and Newtonian mechanics. And it's like, okay, but what does that have to do with the real world?
Yep, you heard that correctly. Austin just asked me what engineering and aerospace had to do with the real world. He genuinely just asked me what engineering has to do with the real world. I'll even ignore the orbital mechanics part since these guys don't believe in space or anything, but aerospace engineering covers so much more than just orbital mechanics. Hey Austin, if you've ever seen an airplane or helicopter in the sky, congratulations, you've just seen a real-world application of aerospace engineering that accounted for gravity and used Newtonian mechanics.
Because your paradigm can't use that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work on its face. You would have to have an ether and it still doesn't work. There's no evidence for it. So it doesn't prove. All that helps us realize is that your religion is so stupid that it's using archaic, outdated equations that have been debunked in your own paradigm because you can't come up with anything better. Right? So like, so you see the problem here? Does this help us verify the Earth's supposedly a ball in space at all, or can we just dismiss it? And no disrespect, but your degree is in pseudoscience.
I didn't plan on having any more input, but I just have to highlight the fact that Austin actually just said engineering was pseudoscience, in case anyone still thought he should be taken seriously as some sort of intellectual.
How you feeling about your college? And you feel like you're going to be mad at your college now, Joe?
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah, man. Aerospace pays pretty well, so I'm fine with it.
Selling out for $1. Sound like a globe earther to me. Hey, Joe B, you want to tag anybody else? Any one of them toxic guys? You want to at them and tell them to pull up over here and maybe help you out?
Peter's here in the audience.
Yeah, I mean, Peter's
Peter's will
here.
Hold
I
on,
mean,
we
I'm not
asking
going to
Joe-
tag him in, but
Joe B, you want to have anybody in here come help you out?
So this is when I tagged in my friend and fellow Flat Earth Helpline host Peter to jump in and talk to Witsit so I could go to bed. This pretty much covers everything I wanted to highlight in our short conversation, and I'll even admit I wasn't too proud of my performance while I was half asleep. I would have preferred to talk to him while better rested so I could call out his lies in real time, but oh well, we learn from our mistakes, and if I ever get another chance to talk to him, I'll be sure to do it with a good night's rest. Also, I want to give a special thank you to Austin for providing this video's outro music, and with that, I'll be wrapping it up, and I hope to see you all next time. Ad Astra.
I know you've been hating this, but how about that radius, huh? What is he saying though? Broken geometry. Okay. I just pointed out, now you're at hominy. Went to your mommy be, trucking and driving, Globers be wildin'. They went out of style.